This fictional mindbender. Disney has a major problem with how it handles their franchises, Marvel and Star Wars. And that problem is that they are marketing those products on a social contract that has long since expired. The contract of believing in simple myths and tales. Marvel and Star Wars started from similar places in that they both were birthed on the premises of creating mythological stories. Now, Star Wars continued this trajectory from 1977 all the way up to 2014, while Marvel Comics changed their course slightly by still telling stories about super beings, but then grounding them in real-world issues that arguably blurred the line between myth and reality. But when Marvel movies came out from Marvel Studios, they adopted the Star Wars trajectory, creating the modern 21st century myth of superheroes, epitomizing the ideals of a good chunk of global society at that time. Yes, there was still character flaws and issues to work through, but the really tough ones like Tony Stark's alcoholism and womanizing quickly disappeared, or were quietly tamped down in favor of the less controversial but still character-driven story beats. In both cases, though, the overarching premises remain the same. Light-hearted tone winning out over the evil. Bad guys are vanquished or dead, and the good guys go home victorious. However, the room began to change about a decade ago, I think. It started with the tampering of two types of myths. The demythologizing of the classical hero as shown in The Last Jedi, and the heroes starting to diverge from the values of their fanbase, such as the controversy with the relationship between Black Widow and the Hulk, and how she wanted children but couldn't have any, and a lot of fans weren't happy with that portrayal. That prior to this, the classic stories stood as untouchable, incorruptible paragons, immune from the flaws of humanity and the pitfalls in our own value systems. But when we started to pull down Mount Olympus to our level, we started making the gods more like us. But why? Because of the shift in our society where we now began to resent those gods, where we stopped believing that heaven, if you will, was this paradise because the real world didn't reflect it so much, that it corrupted our original view of those heroes' journeys, that the very separation meant to inspire us to be like them instead made us resent them, an unreachable ideal that was bullshit to begin with, preached to us by those who presented themselves as the priests of these ideals, but instead turned out to be just as fallible and corrupt as we are. And this was reflected in other franchises as well. Netflix's Marvel series of street-level heroes that lived in the shit and grime of New York rather than the literal tall ivory towers of Avengers Towers, for example. Movies that began showing worlds where the heroes were not heroes but villains that we were powerless to stop, and streaming shows leaning full tilt into the concept of the fallible, relatable heroes who were just as bad, if not worse, than we are, as displayed in the excellent series The Boys and Invincible. And speaking of streaming services, it was Disney's hard lean into that brand that really began to clue us into just how powerful the capitalistic influence was in these classic stories, and how they, Disney, seemed to view us as dumb sheep. Just feed us what we want, and we won't raise a fuss, and we'll give you money. The slowly decaying quality of these shows from what we saw on the big screen, along with its continual unending line of more shows of the like, began waking us up to the possibility that maybe the people who run these franchises don't care about us or the stories that they're telling. And that latter point poisoned the myth and brought a real-life lens to how we began to see these myths. Star Wars got a hint of that with the first episode of The Mandalorian when it first debuted. Rogue One dabbled in the dirt of fallible heroes with its introduction of its main cast, which was subsequently and massively successfully followed up more so and heavily from the Andor series. Marvel may finally be starting to get a clue with the recent success of the Thunderbolts, which focused more on the internal struggles of secondhand heroes, or losers as they're referred to a couple of times in the movie, and their mental health issues, instead of huge city-destroying battles and conflicts with light shows, punching and smashing. So, all this to say that the reason why stories of classic superheroes and Jedi have been failing is because we no longer believe in them, or at the least, no longer see them and or the people that run them as the embodiment of the classic ideals that we want to believe in, but honestly, increasingly are finding that we can't. This is the Fictional Mindbender. Have a good day.